And okay, we're very happy and honored to have you here in this second day of the Colombian Day. Yesterday we had a very interesting conversation with the participants, the presenters. And yesterday, the Bishop John Risillahana presented his work as chairman of the Truth Commission in Rwanda. Professor Leiner started the presentation the day by contrasting the two cases, the two contexts, the Rwandan and Colombian context. Then the professor John Zuluaga from the university Sergio Arboleda talked about the difficulties that the special jurisdiction of peace is experiencing now in the context of the lockdown and the quarantine in Colombia. And Natalia Gomez talked about the work of the interviewers for the Truth Commission. And yes, and now for the program today, we have the Professor Pedro Valenzuela. I will present you more in detail when you start to talk. And then we have the academic director of the German Colombian Peace Institute, Professor Stefan Peters, and then Hugo Buitrago and Camilo Dominguez from the special unit of peace of the Universidad de Antioquia, and Professor Martin Leiner and the Bishop John Rusillahana will hear you for commenting about your presentations. But before starting and give you the word to you, I would like to invite Professor Leiner to say hello and to make the official presentation opening of the second day of the Colombian Day. Are you hearing well? Is the audio is working well? Okay, thank you. Professor Leiner, great, please.
Great that you are here all, and thank you for your time and your presence. I think we continue our experiment to bring together the Rwandan experience and the Colombian. And this is for me a very important moment to hear how such a comparison and a dialogue can start. And also I thank you for all the contributions we had yesterday and your presence. There were some people joining yesterday during the session which we had the time to say hello and that they say who they are and from where they come. And also today we have some new participants. So I would like to make now a round that we all also can see at least the new ones who did not present themselves. I must try to look a bit, and please help me if I forget anybody or do not see on my screen. We have Manuel Eisele, for example, from Karlsruhe. Maybe you switch on your microphone and say hello.
Yeah, hello everybody. I'm Manuel Eisele from Karlsruhe right now. I've made my bachelor thesis with Professor Leiner about the discourse of Alvaro Uribe in the time of the plebiscite in Colombia. And right now I'm thinking about maybe doing a doctoral thesis with Professor Leiner in about 2 years. So I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, great. Great. So as next we have Laura, I think. Laura, you can also switch on your your camera if you want. Laura, are you here? Can you hear me?
Wait a moment, Laura.
It is mute.
We are not hearing you.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Yes. So hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Laura Villanueva. I'm with George Mason University. And today I'm here grateful to be able to share this space. I'm also implicated in Colombia with an association called the Association for the Victims United for Life. That's located in the municipality of Granada in the department of Antioquia. And I just want to thank Dr. Lehner for putting this together. And of course, Luis and also Francesco for doing all the logistics so that we can gather today and this virtual reality that's now a bit of our world. So thank you very much. And I look forward to hearing everybody's presentations.
Great, thank you very much. Then I see Stefan Peters, you only can be with us today. Please say also hello from Professor Stefan Peters, please.
Yeah, hello, good morning or good evening, or better perhaps in this kind of virtual reality to say good Wednesday. I'm very happy to be with you today in this panel. And yes, my name is Stefan Peters. I'm from the Justus Liebig University in Gießen in Germany. However, I'm also here at the Instituto Colombo Alemán para la Paz in Bogota, and I'm just talking to you from Bogota.
Oh, great, and looking forward to hear more from you. So we have then, do not see the whole screen, but for example, we have Claudia Tomadoni, who is with us, who was already yesterday, but did not yet say hello.
Claudia, do you want to say hello, to say where you are? ¿Quieres decir dónde estás y saludarnos, Claudia? Si te parece bien. Okay.
Okay. So then we have as well
Josefina.
Josefina Echevarría.
Sí, hola. Buenos días. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for this invitation. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you, Martin, Luis, and Francesco for organizing this event every year that brings us together. My name is Josefina Echevarría. I'm the director of the PISA Cosmetics at the Kroc Institute in Notre Dame. Thank you.
Josefina was formerly in Innsbruck and also a lot in Jena, also being part of JCRS, and she was together with Luis, they were the persons who introduced us to Colombia and made a lot happen and possible. So thank you so much that you take your time and that you are with us. Then I think Shota from Georgia did not present himself. He is a PhD student with us. Please say a word.
Hello. Hello, Professor. Thank you. My name is Shota. I'm from Georgia, as Professor mentioned. Currently, I'm in Tbilisi, Georgia, stuck in the quarantine regime. I wasn't be able to return to Jena 2 months ago. I'm a doctoral student of JCRS, working on my already second semester on the topic of reconciliation in the meaning of reconciliation concept in the Georgian-Abkhaz conflict. And I'm very glad that I'm part of this conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we have, I think Lena Westphal did not talk yet.
Lena.
Yeah, Lena Westphal.
Lena Westphal.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, Lena, you can
Raise your voice.
You can speak now.
I just got the link from my professor, but I don't know if we were supposed to follow it, but I was interested, so I did follow the link, and now I'm here. I'm from the University of Erfurt, Germany.
Ah, great.
Great.
Super.
From Erfurt University. Thank you, Lena.
Then
Which one more?
Stephanie Mello.
Stephanie Mello.
Yeah.
Yes, hi. I'm Stephanie. Actually, I'm right now on my parental leaving. You can see my daughter here. And I just read about it today, about the event from a friend of mine. And I'm really interested in this kind of topic. I was in summer schools with Johan Galtung. I did an excursion in the Ukraine with in the Ukraine and Russian conflict, and now I'm living in Vienna, and I'm trying to find I don't know, this event came to me like a really good opportunity to come back in my topic of interest in Colombia. I support some organizations for in that work with children, with young girls. Yeah, sorry. And I'm really, I try to occupy my free time in the topic of conflict transformation in different countries around the world. So I'm happy to be here, and I hope I can participate actively.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you. Yeah, great. Is there somebody? Maria Victoria?
Maria Lucia?
Maria Lucia? Yeah.
Maria Lucia?
Hello.
Hello, Maria Lucia.
My name.
It was quick.
Close the microphone from Laura.
Yes.
And who else?
Maria Lucia?
AOE.
Yes, AOE.
Maria Lucia?
And Natalia Restrepo is also new.
Or Natalia Restrepo. We are just curious about new persons today. So for us, it's a pleasure to know where you are, and let's make a sense of closeness.
Yes.
Okay, Aue.
Yeah,
Hi.
my name is Annika Oetzler. I'm a professor of sociology and peace and conflict studies at Marburg University, and Pedro Valenzuela told me about this event.
Great. Thank you to joining us. Thank you, Professor Valenzuela, for widespread our event. Thank you.
And good morning, everybody. I'm Natalia Restrepo. I work at the Barometer Initiative in Colombia of the Kroc Institute. I'm the person in charge of monitoring the implementation of point 5 of the peace agreement in Colombia concerning victims and specifically the Truth Commission. And Josefina Echavarria invited me to this conference.
Great. Thank you, Natalia. Okay, who else? Okay.
Maria Victoria.
Maria Victoria.
Yes, hello. My name is Maria Victoria Cabrera. I'm Ecuadorian, but I'm actually based in Geneva, where I work for the International Labour Organization. I focus on indigenous and people's rights, and on the implementation of ILO Convention 169, which, as you may know, have been widely ratified in Latin America. So I have worked on supervising the implementation of the convention in Colombia and Guatemala, which are countries which have undergone conflict. So I'm very interested in listening to what the panelists will say. I got to know about this event actually by chance through Facebook. So, but I'm happy I did it on time because the topic is quite interesting. Thank you.
Great.
Great. Okay.
Yeah. If we forgot anybody, please tell us or give a sign.
Yes. Okay, Professor Leiner, you want to?
So yesterday we had a small rest from yesterday. This was a question to Bishop John in Rwanda, how the Commission for Reconciliation and Unity dealt with testimonies of victims or of expatriates, so Rwandan fled into a neighboring country. Was there a systematic work on gathering their stories, their witnesses? What were your experience with this? Because we listened to Natalia Gomez, who especially spoke about this work the Truth Commission in Colombia is now doing, taking witnesses and listening to the people who are victims, even living in Germany or far abroad from the Colombian conflict. So I'm very curious to hear you, Bishop John, and thank you for joining today again.
Thank you, Professor Leiner, and your team. Thank you again for organizing the second phase and the second opportunity for sharing about our experience. Again, I will start by telling you that the Rwandan Unity and Reconciliation Commission is a national and a constitutional commission. Therefore, it's not either a voluntary or an NGO. It has all the provision and the services that are required for the service of the survivors of the genocide. The government has established an organization, established an institution which takes care of the survivors of the genocide in Rwanda, doing the following services to them. One, that organization does construct houses and it provides shelter for the survivors of the genocide, especially those who are needy, because now the country has some survivors of the genocide who are in business, who are in academia, who are in other services whereby they can make houses and provide for themselves within their own abilities and choices. But that organization in Rwanda takes care of the housing for the survivors of the genocide. It also provides education and provided education, actually. It still does provide education for the children of the survivors, the orphans of the survivors of the genocide, some of whom now graduated from universities are working in a marketplace like other Rwandans. But those who are young and those who were hindered by the trauma or any other reasons for education, that institution educates them when they want to get educated. That organization also provides for them, provides with an opportunity to start up businesses, and they provide money to get started when they have projects, when they have some submissions of whatever they want to try and do and earn a living, be productive. That organization helps them to start working and earn a business. In addition to this, the the survivors of the genocide in Rwanda have established their own organizations which are registered in the country and are meant actually to be able to talk to each other, interview each other, seek to understand the problematic type of engagement of life from among them, and then be able to represent them in any institution of the government, be it health. You remember yesterday I told you that some survivors of the genocide were beaten and they were maimed. Others were infected with HIV/AIDS on the side of women. These are continually being helped by this institution into their medical services, and they are engaging any possible services for their well-being. So they have organization, a national organization, they have women organizations, they have youths and their students organizations, which do help to have a moment of time to console with each other, time to listen to each other, be able to speak what is down deep into their hearts. And all this work together to facilitate the trauma healing. No matter whatever you may do to a survivor of the genocide, to somebody who lost a family, to somebody who lost anybody, any beloved one in his family, you cannot do much to help forget or compensate that loss. But whatever is required to help that person recover is done. And I want you to know that this is a process. Such a kind of emotional pain is not automatic that you do physical, you do counseling, and you do away with it immediately. So we are engaging that. There is a Ministry of Health working with the trauma. There are institutions, private institutions, counseling institutions trying to help. But as I'm trying to explain and to share with you all, is not something that you can do in a day. You have to keep your hands on, keep your commitment on, so that as they grow, they continue the journey of healing. So basically, this is what we are doing in Rwanda, to be able to reach out, to listen to survivors of the genocide through their own organizations, through the established institutions in the country, but we avail every opportunity for them to be able to speak out and at the same time be able to express themselves and then engage the process of healing. Your second part of the question, Professor Martin, is that what do we do for the people in the diaspora? What do we do for the people, for the Rwandese who have gone outside the country? We have now established the Rwandan committees within the countries where the Rwandan people are. And we are working with our embassies, countries where we have ambassadors, and we have these committees working with our embassies. Whenever they have help, we do reach them. You are aware that our president has been traveling all over, visiting countries, and we get a specific time to reach out to the Rwandese, not only refugees and not only perpetrators, but even those who went for green pastures and those who went to seek jobs and other reasons that took them outside, but are Rwandese. We reach out for them so that they may feel welcome home, and they come to visit, come to be part of the development of the recovery of Rwanda, and also be able to contribute to the well-being of their homeland. And those who can invest, those who can come and talk and give advice and share, learn about what's going on in Rwanda, they can come and visit and do that. So we are doing every possible effort to reach out for our Rwandan people. And more so, we want them to feel the belonging. They need to know they are welcome. They need to know they have the freedom to come and participate in the rebuilding of their nation by any means they can afford to do it. But one of the most important things is that they need to feel at home, and they need to feel part of who they are, and they be able to relate to their source of existence. So briefly, this is how we are doing to interact and to listen and to encourage and to help the survivors of the genocide, and to reach out to the Rwandan communities all over the world, wherever they are in big numbers. We try to help them form committees related to Rwanda, come and visit, feel part and parcel of what is being done at home. I'll be happy to answer any other question, Martin, if you have any, or anybody who may have any other question. But for the time being, that's what I would do to answer that question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bishop John. Maybe just an observation. In Rwanda, people speak much more about survivors, and in Colombia, much more about victims. This is, of course, also related to the situation. In a genocide, surviving is a very exceptional situation, and in Rwanda, in Colombia, it's important also to identify who was victim and to help the victims. But nevertheless, this changes also a bit the approach. If Rwanda is very much, I think, future-oriented. Also in what happens for the survivors is very strong.
Well,
I see, yeah.
We no longer call them, we no longer call the survivors of the genocide victims, because the process of victimizing has ended. They are survivors because the process ended of victimizing them. They survived the victimization, they survived the persecution, they survived the killings. Today, we are rehabilitating them. They are survivors under the process of rehabilitation. So that's the concept. We don't want them to feel they are victims today. They are no longer victims, but they are survivors. They survived the victimization. They survived the hunt for death. Today, they are survivors, and we are rehabilitating them to engage into normal society. Psychologically, we don't want any Rwandan person to feel he's a victim, but we want to express, realize the unfortunate history that led them to the losses of life, property, and the dignity, and everything you can conceive of. But today, nobody is hunting for them, nobody is victimizing them, but everybody should be engaging, should be investing into their recovery. So we want to distinguish between a victim, which is still under victimization, and somebody who got victimized, stopped victimization, and now is into the process of recovery. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you very much. Yes, it would of course also be interesting to see how the Colombians would react and how this feels for them to speak about survivors much instead of victims. But maybe somebody has another question now or something to Bishop John.
If I might ask something, or I don't know, what is the process to raise questions?
Yes, Maria.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. I have a question concerning the cultural difference dimension in the process of reconciliation in Rwanda, which seems to me different than the process of reconciliation in Colombia. One of the policies, if I'm not wrong, and please correct me if I'm wrong, was to adopt an approach of one single Rwanda, one people called Rwandese, and not to let space for cultural distinctiveness, not to recognize existence of tribal groups, indigenous groups, etc., which is completely different in Colombia, where there are even decrees that address indigenous communities victims of the conflict and have special culturally appropriate measures for them. I would like to know your opinion on this. I mean, how true is this that I have read in some articles that there is no proper space or not space at all to continue engaging in this policy of cultural diversity after the genocide. Thank you very much.
Hello, I think if I heard Maria correctly, I would possibly seek some little bit of clarity. She's saying that in Rwanda, we adopted a policy of one Rwanda. And it's not adopting a foreign policy. It's first and foremost, in Colombia, you may be having tribes and you're having different languages, and you may be having real realities that make people be who they are by their languages and their different cultures and the other things that divide them. In Rwanda, we have never been divided as tribes, but we were forced to have by the colonials, to have what we had as social segments, the social categories, social classes, or classes if we want, and they made them tribes. And they registered and they gave us forced on us the identities that we are tribes. And to help ourselves come to who we are, we abolished that foreign adopted political divide and the rule policy on us, and we removed it and came back to who we are. So we are Rwandese, we speak one language, we are one culture. We have one culture. So we came back to that, Maria. We did not create something to abolish who we are to create something new, but rather we abolished the foreign adoption on us, instituted on us for the division and for ruling us, and we removed it. We came back to what we were before that imposition or colonial imposition. So I want to make that clear, and I think yesterday I made it clear. But even those classes were there, and classes remain in every society of the world. People cannot have the same amount of wealth with the competition of production. People have differences. But what we want, we constitutionally, what we are trying to do for our unity is to avoid anything that will divide, cause us more trouble of dividing the society, bring about genocide ideologies again in a society which is under recovery and seeking to rediscover who we are and what we want to achieve in development and health, mental health, physical health, productive health, visionarying of our future and our destiny. We will not entertain anything that will divide us again. So basically, that's who we are, and that's what we are trying to do to achieve what we want to achieve as a nation.
you. Somebody else or? So thank you, Bishop John, for your answers and your readiness to answer. You will not be the whole time today with us. Do you know until when you can stay with us?
He put the mute. Let's see.
I have a question, by the way, for the Bishop John, if I may give my question. Is it okay?
Yes, we can hear you, Ayad.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, excellent. I would like.
Okay.
Okay, I would like to ask a question about the victimhood, because you understand in our situation, victimhood, the perpetrator thinks he's a victimhood, and the victimhood thinks he's a perpetrator. And this is like we have here in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict dilemma with the victimhood. The Israelis are victimhood and the Palestinians are victimhood. How did Rwanda really distinguish the victimhood problem between and the identity of a victimhood? This is, I would like, if you have any shed of some answers or vision, how this can happen when you have two perpetrators that think they are both are the victims. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that good question. In Rwanda, we have allocated some perpetrators who at the same time became the victims, or became the victims first and then became perpetrators. Because as you are aware, a genocide is not something that strikes like thunder. It's prepared. People prepare, first hide it, eventually execute it. After executing it, they deny it. But in the process, there are some people who are forced to participate into the genocide. And some of them were killed in order to force others to do it against their will. Those were perpetrators at the same time victims. And that's why in Rwanda, in our restorative justice, there are categories of perpetrators. There are the first-class perpetrators, those who are designers, those who planned it, those who forced others to do it. That is the first category of the perpetrator or the criminals. Two, there are those who engaged it, but did not get part of the planning and were caught into it and did it. And there are those who did lesser hurting crimes like looting, like spoiling property, but part of the team in a genocide. And those were categories. And I realize with you, as you may realize it, that there are some perpetrators who were at the same time victims. I mean, perpetrators who became victims, but in any case, judicially, they were perpetrators because they got involved into the killings anyway. But they were partly perpetrators. And we have recognized that into the process. And those were given lesser sentences, as you could imagine, into a restorative justice. Thank you very much for asking.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Bishop John Rusiyahana. Now it's the time for hearing Professor Pedro Valenzuela. Pedro Valenzuela is professor of the Faculty of Political Science and International Relations in the University Javeriana of Colombia in Bogota. And yeah, Pedro, the Professor Valenzuela, is probably the pioneer on peace studies in Colombia. He found and directed the first conflict resolution program in the University of Javeriana. He created this program in 1996. And yes, this is a university that now has peace studies and conflict resolution. For us, it's a pleasure to have you here, Professor Valenzuela, and we are honored for your presence here. And okay, we hear Professor Valenzuela.
Thank you, Luis. Well, I'd like to start by thanking the Jena Center for Reconciliation Studies for organizing this event. As Bishop Luciana mentioned yesterday, it's a great opportunity for us to share some reflections and some thoughts around these topics of reconciliation, essentially, although my topic today is a bit more limited to the Truth Commission in Colombia. I find it very interesting, as Martin did yesterday, to compare these two countries. In many ways, there are similarities that you emphasize and differences that you also identify. And I find it extremely interesting because when I came back to Colombia for the first time in the 1990s, I was rather surprised by the very widespread assumption about my countrymen and women that our conflict, Colombian conflict, was the worst in the world, the most difficult, the bloodiest, etc., etc. And I found that very astonishing. I found it pretty much as an ignorance of the rest of the world's conflicts. And I used precisely the issue of Rwanda. I used to say to them, look, what happened in Rwanda is incomparable to what has happened in Colombia in many, many senses. You know, for us to reach the amount of dead people that the Rwandans reached in 2.5 months, about 800,000 people, we will need to keep killing ourselves at the rhythm that we do it today, at the pace we do it today, for about 150 years, what they achieved in 2.5 months. So this is not, of course, to minimize the pain and the suffering that many Colombians have experienced. It's just to bring things into perspective, you know, and to identify the possibilities that we have. It's not the worst conflict in the world. It's not the most complex, and it certainly is not the most difficult to solve. I was very thrilled when I received the invitation to take part in this event, but I was also a bit reluctant. And the reason, as I explained to Luis, is that I have been having some health problems that have kept me from keeping up to date with developments in Colombia. But then I realized that perhaps it would be worth to share at least some broad strokes on the situation about the Truth Commission, considering that there's a lot of expertise in the participants in this event, not only because of the people at Jena, but also because I see some names that are recognized as experts in Colombia. Of course, is Josefina Chavarria, and is Annika Oettler, the professor from Marburg University and also associated with GIGA in Hamburg. She has written extensively on Colombia and on reconciliation in Colombia and in transitional system, transitional justice system. And I see the colleagues from the Universidad de Antioquia, Universidad Sergio Arboleda. In other words, a lot of expertise. So if I have any shortcomings, I'm sure that these colleagues will be able to fill the voids. Okay, so I've been asked to speak specifically on the issue of the Truth Commission in Colombia. And in thinking how to approach the topic, I decided something that is very similar to what Professor Leiner was identifying at the beginning of today's talk. Why is it that the Rwandans speak of survivors and the Colombians speak of victims? What's in the language? So I paid attention to the name of the Truth Commission in Colombia. And I began to wonder, why is it called the way it is called? Why is it called the Commission for the Clarification of Truth, Coexistence, and Non-Repetition? What's in the name? What does it imply that it is called this way? So if we realize there are three elements there, there is the element of truth, the element of coexistence, and the element of non-repetition. So let's deal with each one of them one by one. Truth. What does it mean? We know that there are many varieties of truth. So what is the type of truth that the Truth Commission is emphasizing? What is it that they are going to tell us? And reading the mandate of the Commission, I realized that what they are talking about is really mainly the factual truth. The truth of what happened, but some people have also called in the literature forensic truth. And it's of course a very important objective, to discover what happened in the conflict. But it can also be very frustrating to victims if what they are expecting is, for instance, a final report in which the victims are going to be named, and exactly we're going to be able to tell them what happened to the loved ones or to the relatives or to the friends, and who killed them or who disappeared them or who kidnapped them, etc., etc. But that's not the type of truth that Truth Commission is engaged in trying to find. They will, of course, take into consideration the individual experiences of people who have been victimized by the conflict. But that's not what is going to come in the final report. What they're going to do in the final report is to identify the broad patterns of violation, the broad patterns of violence that took place. And it's extremely important for the country, but it can be frustrating for individual victims if what they are expecting is, for instance, their story to be told in the final report. So it is very clear in the mandate that what they are expecting is that type of factual truth, the broad patterns of violence and violation. They have to contribute to the clarification of what specific violations took place, and of course, which are the actors responsible for it. This is also going to be frustrating for some people because the Truth Commission will not publish individual names. In other words, they are not following the example of El Salvador, where individual perpetrators were identified by name. They will follow the example of Guatemala, where collective actors will be, perpetrators will be identified. So they can say, for instance, that the ones that engaged in this type of violence were the guerrillas or the paramilitaries or the armed forces of the state, but they will not name individual names. This is important, and I don't see this as something very complicated for the Truth Commission to achieve. This is very achievable, and I don't think it's going to be troublesome for them. And the reason is that they have the infrastructure to do it. If we see what's the way that the Truth Commission has been set up, we have 11 commissioners, which is a number that is rather acceptable. You know, the smallest number of commissioners that I can recall is Guatemala, where they only had 3 members, 3 commissioners. One of them, the director, was a German citizen, a German lawyer by the name of Christian Tomusha. And the largest that I can recall is South Africa, with 17 members. So the Colombian is like a mid-range between those 2 extremes, very similar, for instance, to Peru, which had 12 commissioners, Chile, which had 8 commissioners. And the composition I find extremely interesting because in some of the truth commissions around the world, they have used different criteria for inclusion in the commission. For instance, some have emphasized the legal profession, as was the case in Uganda. In the Colombian case, we have chosen a more representative type of criterion for inclusion. So if you look at the composition, you're going to find that out of the 11 commissioners, 5 of them are women. And as you know, the whole gender issue, both in the peace process and the peace agreement, has been extremely important. So it's very significant that almost half of the commissioners are women. And we also find, of course, a reflection of the diversity of the country. Indigenous people, there is an Imbera woman there. Afro-Colombians, the woman from Apartado, I'm sorry, I can't remember their names, of any of the commissioners. The only one that I knew personally, the 2 that I knew personally, one of them was Alfredo Molano, which, as you know, he died, and the other one is Carlos Martin Bernstein. So experts on human rights as well. It is interesting that the only foreign person is Carlos Martin, precisely, given his expertise in the Guatemalan context. So there's a combination of expertise and representativity of the society. But what's important in terms for the capacity of the commission to undertake its mission to completion is, of course, that they do have a good infrastructure. I am not sure about the number I'm going to give you, but the last time that I read about its composition, it had about 299 collaborators. We know that the government cut the funds for the commission, so they perhaps could not hire all the collaborators they wanted, but 299 people is a very significant number. It's much more than, for instance, other Latin American commissions that only had 45 or 50, a team of 45 or 50, like in Argentina or Chile, and it's very close to South Africa and to Guatemala that had more than 300, a bit shorter than Peru that had about 500 collaborators. So what this has meant is that they have acquired the capacity to go to, which is extremely important in the Colombian context, to the most remote areas of the country that have been most affected by the conflict. We cannot say, it would be very simplistic to say that the conflict in Colombia was experienced only in the rural areas. We know that's not true. The cities were very heavily affected by the conflict as well. But certainly most of the victims, for instance, of displacement and dispossession of land, massacres, et cetera, are in the rural countryside. In some areas that are far from the center, far from the capital. And of course, it was very important for the Truth Commission to have the capacity to go closer to the victims, to give access to the victims, to render testimony before the Truth Commission. That's why they now have 28 structures in the region where people can go and render their testimonies. And of course, as we saw yesterday with Natalia's presentation, they also are working abroad, gathering testimonies in Europe and other parts of the world. And that, of course, is Carlos Martin Beristáin's job in the Commission. I was reading some days ago that the Truth Commission in Colombia hopes to interview about 16,000 people. That is a very significant number. If you compare it, for instance, to other Truth Commissions around the world, in the case of Haiti, they only interviewed about 5,500. In Timor-Leste, about 8,000. Well, big numbers, South Africa, about 21,000 testimonies. And the largest that I know of is Morocco with 22,000. So 16,000 is very similar to what they did in Peru, which in Peru they had 15,000 testimonies, and that was, of course, a very significant number. So there's no problem in terms of collecting the information, gathering the information. In addition to the infrastructure of the Commission itself, Colombia has a very long tradition of documenting what has happened in the country. Social organizations, indigenous organizations, women's organizations, human rights organizations, the state, because the Colombian state is extremely contradictory. I often disagree when you speak of the Colombian state in broad terms as if it was a monolith, absolutely unified. It's very contradictory. This is a state that has cooperated with the paramilitaries and a state that has combated the paramilitaries. This is an army that has had alliances with paramilitaries and sectors of the army who have opposed the alliance with the paramilitaries. So it's very, very contradictory. It's not homogeneous or unified at all. So the same Colombian state that has been engaged in gross violations of human rights has also documented the gross violations of human rights by the Colombian state. All you have to do is to read, for instance, the reports of the Defensoría del Pueblo, the Ombudsman, to realize how contradictory this state is. So the international community, of course, the judicial system, of course. So there's no shortage of information. That's not the problem. Where I think we're going to find the problem is in the other conception of truth that the Truth Commission is working with. The Truth Commission is expecting, because they say it out loud and very clearly, that they are going to be able to produce one truth that is going to be legitimate. What they are saying is we will not marry with any of the truths. There are many truths. We will not marry with any of them. We'll hear, we'll listen to all of them, but we will come up with a report that is going to create a legitimate version of the truth. I have serious doubts about that in the context of such a polarized conflict like Colombia is. We were polarized during the conflict. We were extremely polarized during the peace process, and we continue to be extremely polarized after the peace agreement was signed. As we know, there are many, many forces working against peace in this country and that have been attempting to really destroy the peace agreement. I'll go back to that point. But I do have serious doubts about the possibility, at least in the short term, of producing a widely accepted interpretative type of truth in such a polarized society. It is, you know, every time that I hear them say that, I go back to the early works of Michael Ignatieff when the issue of truth commissions began to emerge as an important issue in post-conflict societies. And what Ignatieff, he was very in disbelief, let's say, of the possibility of creating this accepted, interpreted social truth. And his argument was that we presume that societies have only one psyche and not many psyches. That societies have one truth and not many truths. And since there is one truth, and this is his argument, and we will discover that truth, or once we know that truth, once we learn that truth, we will be set free. And I find that that's, I agree pretty much with Ignatieff's position, at least for the medium to long term in Colombia. There are many many things that have to be done for us to be able to analyze. One of the things that the Truth Commission is basing its report, because it is in its mandate, from the previous historical commission for the conflict. I don't know if you remember that. It was about 9 or 11 academics that were given the mission to explain why the causes of the conflict. And of course, as we know, it was a very disparate type of book, because everybody had a very different interpretation. We cannot forget, and Colombia is no exception in this way. Everybody has their myth of victimization, their strategies to avoid the truth, the relativization of very, very complex strategies, etc. So I find that that's going to be a hurdle that we're going to have to overcome, and that it will not be easy to do. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that the Truth Commission will not overcome the divisions of society. So we cannot expect something that they cannot produce, that they cannot achieve. Now, what is the advantage? Of course, that the Truth Commission is not operating on its own, and I will go back to this point in a second. The second point is, of course, in the name, is coexistence. It really took me by surprise. Why coexistence? Why not reconciliation? As we know, the term, to include the term reconciliation in the first Truth Commissions was not common. When the Truth Commissions emerged in the 1980s, neither Argentina or Uganda included the term reconciliation in their name. But then we know that there were more Truth Commissions created during the 1990s. And the first one that included the name, the expression reconciliation in the name was Chile. It was not South Africa. Everybody, of course, recognizes the South African Commission much more than the Chilean, but the first one to use the name reconciliation was Chile and not South Africa. But that doesn't mean that because they introduced the term, they actually managed to create a trend. If you look at the other Latin American Truth Commissions that were created in the 1990s, they did not include the name, the expression reconciliation in the name. I'm referring, of course, to two very important commissions, El Salvador and Guatemala, and in the Caribbean, Haiti, they did not include it either. In Africa, Chad and Nigeria did not include the name reconciliation. So yes, for the first time, it was included in the 1990s, but it doesn't mean that it became a trend. However, it did become a trend in the 2000s, in the 21st century. So you see, for instance, the issue of Burundi, of Rwanda, of Liberia and Sierra Leone, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Ghana, and South Korea, and Solomon Islands, a whole bunch of countries that adopted Truth Commissions and included the term reconciliation in. Latin America, however, did not do so. So we look at only Peru and Honduras included reconciliation in the term. If we look at the others, Uruguay, Paraguay, Bolivia, Brazil, and Colombia did not include the term reconciliation in the name. And I find that very, very interesting. I have no explanation for that. It's just something that surprises me, given that the peace process in Colombia was so much attuned with the trends at the international level. So what does it tell us? That they chose coexistence instead of reconciliation. At first I thought, well, they are really considering reconciliation in a very minimalist sense. Coexistence implied some sort of reconciliation in the sense that former enemies that were engaged in a very violent conflict all of a sudden found the capacity to live side by side without violence. That they decided that perhaps law and other mechanisms of conflict resolution would replace the violence that they have been engaged for so very long. In other words, that they were able to bring to an end the cycle of violence, vengeance, revenge, etc., etc., or what the Indian political theorist Rajiv Bhargava calls the transition from a barbaric society to a society with a minimal decency. But as we know as well, this minimalist position of reconciliation has been extremely criticized by human rights organizations, by the international community. It's not accepted. And it is not accepted because it is suggested that it sacrifices the past for the sake of the future, that it favors the perpetrators by ignoring the demands of those who have been victimized by the conflict, that it favors basically forget and forgive. But we know that's not the case with the Colombian Truth Commission. They have not adopted this minimalist position of reconciliation. And the reason is that we are not forgetting the past. That's why we have a Truth Commission. So it's very interesting that they have chosen an expression that can be considered so minimalist, when in fact they do have a much more ambitious concept of reconciliation. In the mandate itself, it is expressed that coexistence transcends the simple living, sharing the social and political space, and that it implies, for instance, the creation or the construction of an environment where freedom, democratic freedoms, and tolerance are promoted and are created. So they do not share the minimalist conception that the term coexistence may imply. So I really don't understand why they chose that. I said that the Truth Commission is not an isolated institution. It is part of a very comprehensive system of transitional justice. A lot of you know the components. It is not only the Truth Commission, but also the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, the unit for the search of the missing or presumed missing people, etc. So it's what the International Center for Transitional Justice has called a holistic approach. You know that some maximalist positions insist on trials and punishment for the perpetrators, traditional punitive justice, and some moderate positions argue for truth commissions in exchange for justice, sacrificing a little bit of justice. Some minimalist positions have argued for amnesties, and the International Center for Transitional Justice argues for what they call a holistic approach, which includes all of this. And empirical studies by academics, and comes to mind a study by a professor from the University of Oxford, I cannot remember his name, where the empirical study showed that where the guarantee for non-repetition is better achieved when you combine both trials with amnesties, for some people, of course, and in certain conditions, and the Truth Commission. So that is precisely what the Colombian system has adopted. And therefore, I find very, very curious, at least, that they have chosen coexistence instead of reconciliation. The third element is non-repetition. And I really like the way that they have put it there, because what they say, it sounds not ambitious at all. And that is to contribute to lay the groundwork for non-repetition. In other words, had they said, that they are going to achieve non-repetition, it would have been completely absurd, because that is well beyond the possibilities of any Truth Commission. Non-repetition is only achieved after profound cultural and institutional changes. If you look, for instance, at the way that people have achieved, at the way that people conceived the reconciliation right after the peace agreement was signed, the surveys, what they showed is that people, yes, understood reconciliation as a matter that had to be, that had to take place between perpetrators and victims, that had to take place, so in some cases they identified specifically the FARC and victims, people who have caused injuries or damage to other people, and those who were victimized. And I'm talking about 60–65% of the population saying this. But in addition to identifying this element, they also, probably more than 70% said, but reconciliation also means that the state has to come to the regions, that the state has to come to those marginalized areas of the country where the state presence has been extremely weak, or the only state presence that they have felt has been in a repressive capacity with the army, etc., etc. And this is very interesting, because what people are saying is that reconciliation is not only a horizontal type of reconciliation, but also a vertical type of reconciliation between the state and the citizens. And that's the only way that we are going to achieve, of course, non-repetition, when the state implements the institutional reforms that are necessary for that to happen. This means, because it's the people's conception, that their social and economic life has to be improved, that the gap between the rural, between the countryside and the cities has to be closed, etc., etc. In other words, we have to put the Truth Commission and the objectives that they propose in the whole broader concept of the peace agreement, which, even though it's not an agreement that is proposing extremely radical reforms, it does touch many, many interests, and therefore it has generated a lot of reaction. This is a country, remember, where by 2016, that is right after the peace agreement was signed, was still arguing, and again, this is a survey from Activoca, where they found that close to 70% of the population argued that this is a country where human rights are not respected. 70% argued that this is a country where there is very little space for political opposition, and that there is a huge deficit of basic freedoms. So all these are issues that have to be addressed in order for us to reach reconciliation. And let me add another obstacle to full reconciliation and respect of human rights in Colombia. And one has to keep in mind that the conflict in Colombia, or the war in Colombia, did not come to an end with the signing of the peace agreement with the FARC. And the reason is, of course, that there are many other organizations engaged in violence. Among them, the FARC itself. You know, some sections of the FARC that refused to sign the peace agreement or signed it and decided to go back to the struggle. The ELN, of course, paramilitary groups, or neo-paramilitary and Bakrims, etc., etc. So this is very contrary to the approach of the liberal peace, because the liberal peace approach presumes that there is a state, you know, that exercises sovereignty all over the territory, a delimited territory, but we know that's not the case in Colombia. What we have here is spaces or areas of the country where there are multiple sovereignties, including actors that are fighting the state for control and for exercising sovereignty in that area. And this is extremely difficult for the implementation of the agreement and for reconciliation, because what we have here is a continuous victimization, particularly of social leaders and of all those that are engaged in the implementation of the peace agreement, and environmentalists, human rights defenders, leaders of the Junta de Acción Comunal, and all kinds of social leadership at the local level. So what we have in Colombia after the peace agreement, and that's what makes it so difficult to achieve reconciliation, is what some authors have called spaces of indefinition. You know, where after a peace agreement, there are still zones that are extremely violent. Or what Teresa Mora, that I can recall, called violent peace zones after a peace agreement. So we cannot put, of course, the whole weight of reconciliation on a commission, the Truth Commission. Is doing an amazing job, and it will do in many other ways that we can go deeper if you prefer. But I was just simply referring to the type of truth that they are going to achieve, the difficulties in accepting. We don't know what's going to happen with the final report. If you remember, it might be completely rejected by certain elites of the country, as happened in Guatemala. You may remember that when the Guatemala report was being turned in officially, the government was there, Rios Montt was there, and Rios Montt refused to go up to the stage to receive the report. He sent actually a woman who was, I don't remember exactly what post she held, but he refused to receive it himself. And as you know, there is all kinds of denials and rejection of the report in Guatemala as well. So it's going to be an uphill battle that we don't have to continue waging for decades to come. I always keep in mind the admonitions by the Italian philosopher Norberto Bobbio, when he explained that there are 3 ways to avoid violence. And one of them is what he referred to as instrumental pacifism. In other words, how we can control the means with which we participate in conflict in order to avoid violence. And the other one is what he called institutional pacifism. How do we devise institutions to deal with inevitable social conflicts that every society is going to experience? And finally, how do we transform cultures of violence to a culture of peace? And we are a very long way from achieving that in Colombia. So we might actually change our instruments, we might devise some institutions that will take us some way, but the only way that we can really achieve a long, sustainable peace is by working on the culture that characterizes Colombia. And I'm sorry to say that our peace culture is not very democratic. It's a peace culture that does not accept the difference, and that's why our emphasis in promoting diversity and acceptance of that difference, because we cannot remember, unlike Rwanda, because Bishop Rusihanda's explanation was very clear, where these divisions were artificially created by the colonialists. In our case, it's different. What we tried was to suppress the difference. And that concept that we inherited after the Spanish left, we cannot forget that power here was not inherited by the native people. Power here was inherited by the children of the Spanish. And when we tried to construct this identity, which was a total myth in practice, that we were the result of the encounter of two cultures, Europe and the indigenous people, and we began by defining the nation in a very nasty way, because we were already excluding about 15 to 20% of the people who are Afro-descendants. So we said, okay, our culture is hybrid. In other words, to be a Colombian is to eliminate the European elements and the indigenous elements. It has to be this hybrid construction. In practice, what we did was that we eliminated the indigenous, but that we embraced the European. And that has been the reality. And that's why the insistence, to respond also to the question that was posed to Bishop Rosiahana, that's why our insistence in recognizing that difference and embracing that difference, because we really tried to suppress it. We really tried to commit cultural genocide against the indigenous people. So with all, perhaps not very well hilvanadas, I have no idea how to say that in English, ideas, I bring my presentation to an end, and thank you very much.